Okay, cool. Morning once again. Cool. Let me first start off with some quick introduction. So I'm Sandeep Krishnappa, and I have around 23 years experience working in different sectors, different domains, and I've always focused on knowledge transfer and product. That's why I'm focusing on product development at the moment. You might be wondering, why is somebody from ClimateNet actually speaking? And I think one of the things I've learned working in different industry is, it doesn't matter what industry you're solving a problem, that same problem will eventually surface in other industries as well. And if you have a solution in one industry, you can literally pick that up and put it in another industry. But of course, it depends on the maturity of every industry in terms of when they are ready to embrace that solution. So when it comes to just my experience, financial services, utilities, fast-moving consumer goods, insurance company, defense, space, transport sector, and even oil and gas. So you might be wondering, why is somebody who's from a completely different domain going to be talking about healthcare? So I'm not an expert in any of the domains because I've moved so many times. But one of the things I've always done is making decisions on architecture and making decisions on what tech stacks you have to pick. So this comes back to the main question: what value are you adding wherever you're working on? So that's why I'm going to pick some high-level, points which I want you to take away. What you're not going to see is code snippets, because I saw there were some code snippets in the last one. And what you're not going to see is data flow diagrams, because again, I didn't know who's got what background, and it's probably a best decision I made, because if nobody's worked on blockchain here, there's no point in me putting data flow diagrams of blockchains and different tech stacks and blockchain. So what you're going to take away from today's session is, you will appreciate the role of climate change in whatever you're doing in tech, and you'll also understand how blockchain can actually play a role when it comes to data sharing in health industry. That's what you're going to walk away from. So currently, what I'm doing is I'm a CPTO. I'm looking at product and technology at KlimateNet. KlimateNet is a global community of people working on climate. KlimateNet got incubated in Cambridge. So we have a huge network of people in Paris and London, and I'm trying to get the network get a bit more bigger when it comes to Asia in general. So that's why I'm spending the next 2 to 3 months here in Bangalore trying to get more people into KlimateNet. Other than that, I'm also a license holder for TEDx. How many of you watch TEDx's? There's plenty happening in every city, and it's usually volunteers who run these. So I usually host something called TEDx Woodlane and TEDx Woodlane Women. So if you just search this on YouTube, you'll find a bunch of talks. And a lot of talks which just went live last Friday is also focusing on health, which I actually hosted. So if any of you want to talk about anything in health, and it needs to be a TEDx, just reach out to me, because I'll be hosting one in Bangalore. I'm hosting one in Bangkok, one in Istanbul, and the ones I always host is in London. So that's my stuff. The last one is, I'm also a technical advisor. I advise a couple of startups, and you can see one of the first startup which I put as a logo is My Green Doctors. So everything I'm going to share today is some of the learnings I've had in the My Green Doctors space, where I'm actually advising them. Today, you're going to hear a lot about patient data, because it's health. What I'm going to do different is, I'm going to talk about from a health provider point of view, because they are also important. And there's so much opportunities when it comes to health provider perspective. So that's what I'm going to share. And of course, I'm also into beauty and sustainable fashion and a few other areas, which I don't want to bore. But one thing which is common is using blockchain and data sharing. It doesn't matter what industry. So that's what I do today. So one of the first things I want to start off is a maturity model. What that means is, it doesn't matter what you're doing today, which tech stack, your focus is on AI, your focus is on blockchain, everything matures as you progress. And I think the first time I worked on AI was back in 2012. And if I compare that with now, things have moved on a lot. There's a lot of problems which has been solved in the AI space, and a lot of problem has been solved even in the blockchain space. So actually, you are in a very good place today compared to the problems which people had to face back in the past. So I'll give you an example. Because we are talking about data sharing using blockchain, within that context, my first project or the first client I got involved was working with a hospital. And this was back in 2004. It was a hospital in Mysore. And what I noticed was they were using Microsoft Access for storing data. Remember what I said, providers, not patients, providers. How many of you know what Microsoft Access is in this room? Curious question. One person, two person, because we are standing in Microsoft React, I thought, let me ask you that question. So during those days, people are using Microsoft Access. This was even before SQL Server came out, Microsoft SQL Server 7.0. And then, of course, you had 2000, 2003, and then, of course, you've got a lot of other variants from other vendors as well. So that's what I saw personally first in terms of what is centralized data storage. It was Access. And then, of course, things have matured. People started using proper databases, which is relational databases. And then as things progressed, people started asking questions, where can blockchain add a value? Because a common question people always say is, why should I use blockchain when I can use database? And this is the type of questions I get even from PhD students. Because if you spend too much time in a specific domain, you tend to get conditioned in that specific domain. So I always tell people, the moment you don't trust people with whom you're working, that's where blockchain starts adding value. It's because when you look at how companies tend to use databases, they use it for their own usage. They never think about how similar companies like them, they need to partner with them, they need to work with them. How would that work? So when it comes to multiple stakeholders, it starts making sense. So I started getting this question very, very early on. Why are we using blockchain? Why don't we just use a normal database? So one of the things I think the whole industry went was they started focusing on putting transaction data. Very, very simple transaction data. You paid me, I paid you. That's it. Just like what you will write in a simple book. That's how they started. And then they started realizing a challenge with that. They said, hey, I want to put a video. I want to put an audio. Can I do that? So that was one of the next fundamental questions, because that's what they did with databases. You started with simple, store somebody's name, and then they said, okay, let's put audio, let's put video. So that's the natural progression. And in fact, one of the first projects I started working on when it comes to blockchain was working with Unilever, and we were tracking GMO. Does your food has GMO? And the lab reports were big documents, which would say yes, no, blah, blah, blah. So the question I was like, can we just throw a document in a blockchain? We're like, that's not what it was meant to handle. So that's where I saw how the maturity started growing. People wanted to do more stuff, the limitations, and you need to understand what you should do where. The next one is decentralized storage. What is decentralized storage? What if you don't want to store it in just one place, you want to store it in multiple places? Now think about it. The basic thing about blockchain is you don't have one copy in one company, one country. You're replicating everywhere. Now think about what does this do when it comes to videos? What does this do in terms of audio? The content size becomes bigger. You'll be using a lot of storage space, a lot. And this is a very similar conversation with AI, where what is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to climate with AI? Any guesses? Server costs. It's very expensive. Of course, you get free credits from Microsoft, AWS, Google, but that free credits runs out at some point. So it's the cost. And of course, it's also energy. It uses a lot of energy. I used to get questions saying, Sandeep, blockchain is not good because it's energy intensive. That was a normal question I get, because that's how blockchain started. Now think about it. That's how even AI started right now. It's very energy intensive. But of course, since last 2 weeks now, you don't need the expensive chips, and it's changing the whole how you think about it. this is one of the fundamental reasons why I was saying it doesn't matter what you're focusing in tech, you have to start thinking about climate change. You have to start thinking about the bigger impact. You can innovate amazingly, but at some point, people will start asking questions. That's what happened with Bitcoin. How many of you have heard of Bitcoin? Come on. So when Bitcoin started, it was one of the most innovative stuff, but it was not meant for data storage. And you always have a challenge balancing. When Bitcoin came, they said privacy and security is a number one priority. They didn't care about, energy efficiency. So the next generation which came, which was Ethereum, they said, you know what, we will do exactly what Bitcoin did, but we'll do it better. And they also had a plan that at some point, we will be very energy efficient. So they put that part of their roadmap. That is what you have to remember. It doesn't matter what you're working on, you have to put climate in the roadmap because eventually it'll come and bite you. So you have to plan for it. And I think that's what's going to happen with AI now. And a lot of questions I get from people is, look, Python is not the best programming language to be using for AI. That's one more question which people ask me. So moving back to this, the last thing I see is sustainability. In fact, last time I spoke in Microsoft Reactor 1 year ago, there was a blockchain company called Filecoin, which was actually talking after me. And they were talking exactly about this challenge. If you start using too much storage, it has energy impact because you're using servers. So now they've started issuing certificates to people who store using renewable energy. So that's where they started thinking about it a long time ago. And now they have an answer. So if a company comes and says, I want to use blockchain, but it's got too much impact, Filecoin is one of the answers for it. Same thing is going to happen with AI as well. There's already answers coming in terms of energy efficiency. So I'd put these, do we share slides after this with the people who attend the session?
Yes, we do.
Okay, cool. So I'm not going to go into specifics in the interest of time, but I've put a couple of slides just to give you a difference in terms of why you would use what. You can go through it. Since most of you are new to the world of blockchain, I think it's really important how you can see these differences. So because these slides are going to be shared, I will get this out. So this is the whys of the 4 maturity model. Now, the good thing is you can be working on any tech stack and you can work on blockchain today. As I said, things have moved. The first time I was working on blockchain, the first cloud provider which was helping with the blockchain, you'll be surprised. Take a guess. You've got so many cloud providers. Interesting. It was Microsoft, AWS, not AWS, Azure. And this was very, very early on. In fact, what they did was they came up with a private version of Ethereum, and they offered on AWS with one of the partners. So within 30 minutes, you could spin up your own node. And this was one of the first projects I got involved, and it was a project with one of the central banks. And that's when I realized that, wow, finally we have a big service provider coming on board with blockchain. But those days, there was a lot of conversation about private chains, not even public chains. So that's where it started. So today, you can see that there's so many variants of chains which you can pick. Personally, I worked with Ethereum. I worked with IBM's supported Fabric. And the last one is Stellar. Interesting thing is I picked up Stellar because they were the only chain which is audited by Big Four, which is PwC. And they were one of the first chains to say, we will focus on proof of stake rather than proof of work. And I think proof of work is where you spend a lot of energy. And even Ethereum was not there yet. So I made that choice very early on. This is the kind of choice you will have to make. If you get into certain positions in certain companies, they trade off versus what you should be using today versus what you think you should be preparing for tomorrow. So you can see that there's a bunch of blockchain cloud service providers, there's smart contract languages, and when it comes to front end, It doesn't matter what front end you're using, you can use blockchain. It was very painful a couple of years ago. Today, because of extra plugins, because of third-party providers, your life is actually easier now in terms of using blockchain to work on. As I mentioned, today you're going to hear a lot about patient data, and I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to care provider data. This is where I'm going to be talking quick. Now, what do you think is the most important if it's patient data? Just one thing, which is really important. Privacy. Interesting. Now, let me give you two options and you can pick from them. Is it saving money or saving time? Exactly, because it's your health. We all have limited time. So it's saving time is a big focus area when it comes to patient data. But when it comes to healthcare provider, what's important? Saving cost, saving money. That is the most important thing. So it's the efficiency. The reason why people jump into customer data is, as I said, there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to privacy, what you can fix, and also data ownership. One of the main reasons where blockchain is playing a very interesting role in personal data, which is you can own your own data. So that's why there's a lot of excitement, etc., when it comes to personal data the moment you say blockchain. And same thing with even monetization model. A lot of people are looking at how do you help people monetize their own data. And of course, compliance. These are the three exciting reasons why people gravitate towards personal data. But I'm going to be talking about the missed opportunity, which is care providers. Efficiency is number one. This is why a lot of companies are going to spend millions in terms of cost savings. So that's first one. Second was trust networks. We are getting more and more interconnected, which means more people have to have more partners. They have to start sharing data. They have to work together. That's where the trust element comes in. And last one is smart contract innovations. There's a lot being done in terms of how you program this. So those are the three opportunities which I think people don't realize there is a lot you can do when it comes to care providers. So some of the quick examples I'll give you is carbon tracking. Every company have to track today. Education and certification. Every doctor has to be certified so that you know they're qualified. So that's one more area where education and certification is playing a big role when it comes to blockchain. That's happening with your land records today as we speak. That's happening even with your education records. So that's a big area. Climate assessment. When I say climate assessment, how much are you burning as electricity? Every care provider has to do that. Even the medical devices, the medical solutions they come up with, they all have a big footprint. You need to help them calculate that really quick, really easily. That's where the cost saving is. And of course, incentive. You need to start thinking about what incentive you give for these care providers to work on it. I'll tell you something, doctors are busy. One thing they don't have time is time. So if you go tell them, hey, I'm going to make this whole thing easier, they don't care because they literally don't have time because of the amount of people they have to deal with every single hour. So this is why you need to come up with an interesting way to incentivize. And that's where blockchain is playing some interesting roles. Because most of you have not worked in the blockchain space, one thing for you to look at is called decentralized identifier. Something to Google, look at, because that's changing how we all own our identity. And of course, Microsoft is one of the founding members of Decentralized Identity Foundation. It's called DIF Foundation, something for you to Google and check if you are interested in blockchain. And here's a very high level structure. I thought, let me put at least one structure so that you can pick it up. So you can see that you've got healthcare providers, clinicians, insurers, researchers, and even patients. I put patients at the bottom because I think you're going to hear that a lot today. And all these people will have a digital wallet. A couple of years ago, people didn't know what a digital wallet was. Now everyone carries a digital wallet. Same thing's going to happen with your healthcare data. On the left-hand side, you see structured and unstructured data. All those things have to work. And you see on the top, I have put something called DID registry, which is Decentralized Identity Registry. This is one of the reasons why I said, if you're interested in blockchain, Google DID. It's going to change how you think about identity completely. Last thing I want to say is really quick challenges. How you onboard people has been a challenge in the crypto world. It's the same challenge even when you start working with blockchain. So because we are so used to QR codes, QR code plays a huge role in terms of onboarding people. So that's one of the solutions which we can use today, which is a big challenge before. Next one is KYC AML. Today, anywhere you go, you want to book, they'll ask you for your phone number. That's how they do your KYC. And that's the same thing which is happening even in the blockchain world. Now you can be compliant. Wallets, everyone have to have a wallet. So again, there's a lot of challenges with wallets as well, especially if you're using a public chain and that public chain is too busy, it tends to fail the transaction, which means you need to make sure that transaction is rolled. So there's a couple of challenges there when it comes to onboarding. When it comes to interoperability, you've got something called Anchor APIs. So how do you work with third party? So they've got a couple of plugins when it comes to interoperability. Life is much more easier today compared to 3-4 years ago when it comes to the world of blockchain. I mentioned DID. Have a look at DID. Cross-chain. If you remember, I showed you so many chains here when it comes to on the top here. So people are doing different things. What you need to do is you need to start talking to each other. So there are challenges around cross-chain interoperability, and people are finding solutions for that as well. The last one, which is the most important, is scaling. And if you're working in AI, it's a massive opportunity because you need smart agents which can queue the processes of transactions, and it can actually tell you which chain to use or what time to use. Because if you're using a public chain, you are spending money. Just like how you spend credits on AWS or Azure, same idea when it comes to using public chain. You pay them a fee. And certain times, the fees is very high if you're using public chain. And this is where I think AI agents can play a huge role managing the cost in the queues, etc. So that's what I wanted to quickly share when it comes to challenges. Last point, unique opportunity, where I see things growing, is verifiable data sharing with zero knowledge proof. If people don't need to know you're 18, you're 25, you're 30, they just want to know if you're an adult, that's it. Then you don't need to give them that number. That's where the zero knowledge proofs are coming in. Cross-organizational interoperability, again, it's a mouthful as a word. Basically, how do you work with more companies? That's a big opportunity right now because everyone's partnering with everyone today. They see that you don't have to compete. You can collaborate in so many ways. And the last one is incentive mechanism. There's a whole engineering called tokenization which is happening, and you can do a PhD now in tokenization. It's about how do you incentivize people to use blockchain? How do you incentivize people to use the product? And remember, traditional problems have not gone away. I think we had a speaker talking about notifications. How do you notify people? And especially when it comes to healthcare, you need something very convenient on a phone, but you don't want to bombard them. So those are the kind of problem which still exists, but now you're getting new challenges. How do you incentivize them as well? That's it. Any more questions? Please feel free to get hold of me. Any questions on data sharing, blockchain, or even if you want to know what I'm doing in other domains, and especially in healthcare as well. Thank you.